So thanks, Artemis. I want to say thank you as well for that. And I'm glad we had the time to talk about it afterwards as well. It was really important. So this presentation is really different, actually, because this presentation is really me sharing some emerging thoughts. I'm at the beginning of the process of writing a paper about this topic. So it's not a finished piece. It's not something that I've already written and I'm ready to publish or I've published. It's something that I'm working on at the moment. And I'd actually really appreciate comments at the end because it will help me in developing my thinking. So I think I need to give you a bit of context first about me. So I'm Mandy, and I'm a lecturer in initial teacher education at Leeds Beckett University. I've been there for 10 years and I've been an academic for 12 years. But I used to be a primary school teacher, and that's what I do now. I teach primary school teachers, how to be primary school teachers. So my main teaching at Beckett is with undergraduates. So I teach first, second and third year undergraduates. And our student body at Leeds Beckett is very different to Manchester University because I have worked here as well. And we have a lot of local students from West Yorkshire. We have a really diverse cohort. We have a lot of widening participation students. So we have students from all different kinds of backgrounds. We have lots of students from low socioeconomic status, lots of students who they're the first person in their family to go to university. So it's a very particular group of people. And I teach modules in early language acquisition. I used to be an early years teacher, so that's one of my areas of expertise. So I teach early language acquisition. I teach music because basically I can play the piano. They're like, you can teach music. So I teach music. And I teach digital pedagogies, and that's actually much more related to my research interest. So my PhD was in datafication. So that module that I teach on digital pedagogies actually relates to my academic work. The others really relate to my practice. And alongside that, I'm a member of an international Lacan reading group with other educators. So when I did my PhD here with Erica, I was introduced to the work of Lacan and I started reading about it then. And after that, I carried on and I joined this group. It's a really unusual group, actually. We're all in teacher education and we're all over the world. So there's somebody in New Zealand, there's somebody in Singapore, there's somebody in Denmark, somebody in Finland, there's a couple of us from England. And we share this interest in psychoanalysis and education, which is a little bit niche, I think. None of us come from a psychology background. We're all educators. We're all ex-teachers, actually, pretty much. So we're coming at this as teachers, as not experts in psychoanalysis, but we try and explore psychoanalysis as a tool for thinking, as a way of looking at things differently. And I've loved being in this group because it's one of the really few times where I read something and I just think, I don't even know where to start with this, but we kind of get through it. I've started doing notes when I read a chapter in Lacan. My notes are all pictures and drawings, and because that's the way I've found my brain works best. I've realised it's fine to say I don't understand this. Help me. We help each other, and I think it's actually really good to be completely out of your comfort zone. And just be there, live with that feeling of, I don't really know what I'm talking about here. So maybe I won't know what I'm talking about here, but you can help me. So the thing we have applied this Lacanian thinking to is a problem that I've seen at work. So while I've been teaching undergrads, I've been teaching at Beckett for 10 years, like I said, and I've really seen a change in our undergrads. So first years in particular, they're 18 years old. They're young, they're still teenagers. I've noticed that in my sessions, I usually have, I always have parts of my seminars where I say, right, everybody, talk on your tables about this topic and then feedback to the group. And usually in the past, we've had a lively discussion and everybody's happy to feedback. Just recently, no, it's like silence. I say, right, everybody, talk about this. Nobody says anything. everybody's really, really quiet. And I've been like, what is going on here? So instead of talking about the question with their peers, I've noticed that the students are searching it up on their phones or searching it up on their iPads or laptops. And what I'm realizing is that they are outsourcing their thinking. They are not thinking. The thinking is happening in the iPad or the laptop or the phone. And I'll just give an example. So at the beginning of my work on language acquisition theory, I say to them, right, what do you think theory is? And I even specifically say, I want to know what you think. I want your opinion. There isn't a right or wrong answer here. I'm just interested in what you think. And I just get the Google Gemini summary. And they're like, oh, it's the scientific blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about scientific theory. We're in social sciences. It's a different kind of thing. So and I just see this again and again and again and again. I saw it yesterday. And I think, do you know what the question was yesterday? We were teaching music and I said, can you think of any space films? Because we were going to make space music using digital technology. Can you think of any space films? I go around the class, some of them, I'll just look on Netflix to see what space films there are. So I was thinking about this problem. Yeah. Now, I don't think there's one cause. I think there's multiple things going on here. But I've been using Lacan to think about it, to conceptualize what I've seen. So I thought about my observations and I've discussed them with my friends. And then I've applied Lacanian ideas. So I've particularly looked at the mirror stage. We've been reading Igby. So I've looked at the mirror stage because we read that chapter recently. And I've looked at the function and fields of speech and language in psychoanalysis, which is it took us weeks to read that chapter. But I've actually got a lot out of that. So we've been using that as well. So those are the two texts that I've been using. And I've been thinking in particularly about the mirror stage and does it apply to this? Does it help me think about what I'm seeing? And about language and subjectivity and how language is involved in forming the subject. So first of all, the mirror of AI. Okay, so I'm going to assume, I know some people are absolute experts in Lacan here in Parker, but so some of you might know nothing about it, so I'm just going to explain it a bit as far as I understand it. So Lacan uses the mirror stage to sort of conceptualize the initiation of the child into the symbolic order, which means the kind of world of culture, the world in which we live. And the child sees themselves in the mirror, the baby sees themselves in the mirror, and they see themselves as they are seen by others. And it's a time when they come to realize, I'm a person. It's when they develop self-consciousness. And it's actually a really important aspect of subject formation. This idea of who am I? Seeing themselves as others see them. And it relates to the ideal I as well. So this ideal view of who I might be. And I would suggest that this frequent interaction with AI and with digital technology more generally, I would say it's transforming subjectivity. It's changing subjectivity. So a bit like the baby, when they look in a mirror, sees themselves in a different way. I would suggest that this constant interaction with digital technology and AI is making us as humans see ourselves in a different way. It's an initiation into almost like a different symbolic order or a different version of the symbolic order. And I think I would suggest that the subject is seeing themselves as a kind of cyborg subject. If you are outsourcing your thinking to your phone or your digital tech, isn't that a cyborg self? Isn't that a self that's part machine? Okay, so I would suggest that it is. And I forgot on my other version, I referenced Donna Haraway there. I really should have done when I first talked about the cyborg, because she wrote about that in the Manifesto for Cyborgs. So I've also worked on this in some previous work about this cyborg self, this idea that the current subjectivity is a kind of cyborg, it is a kind of fusion of machine, and human, and that makes us different. That makes us different as subjects. So in Lacan, the specular image, the image in the mirror, is described as a gestalt. I didn't know what that meant, I've got to tell you, but I found out that it means like a whole, a really coherent sort of self. And there's this ideal I, which contrasts to the child's experience of their own body. So when the child experiences their own body, it's doing all sorts of things they're not very much in control of. It's all over the place. And that is very different. It's an incoherent self that they're experiencing. But what they see in the mirror is this ideal I, this gestalt, this whole self, in contrast to the disarticulated and turbulent self of the child. And they're aware that that specular image is a misrecognition. It seems like this is me, but actually it's a misrecognition. It's not me. And this imago, this ideal I, the version of the self in the relation to the world outside, is also in relation to the other, the big other, the sort of expectations that they imagine on themselves by society. And for students, I would say that that cyborg self is also a misrecognition. It gives this impression to the students that I can know anything. I can be an all-knowing student. I can be an all-knowing self, because anything I don't know is in that extension of myself in my phone. And it presents this ideal I of a knowing subject. And that's actually, as well as giving them this idea that I know I can know everything, is also alienating, because it makes it's the process that makes the human. The processes that makes us human are being outsourced. That thinking is being outsourced. So it's a dehumanizing process, this becoming a cyborg. And the knowledge of this misrecognition is alienating us, because this all-knowing gestalt in the mirror, this cyborg self, is actually, it's a machine. And it makes them realize, yeah, maybe I don't know everything. And that brings me to the lack. So there's this idea, that this mirror image, this idea that I can know everything, this cyborg self, alleviates the vulnerability of me not knowing. It's got an illusion of mastery, and it sort of, in the child, it covers over that primordial helplessness that the child experiences. But with the students, it covers over that vulnerability of not knowing. I think my students can't bear to not know. And actually, the not knowing is what I experienced in the Lacanian reading group. And they're experiencing that same feeling, but covering it over. It's almost like there's a massive hole there, which is this lack of knowing, and they're covering it over with this idea that they can know everything through their phones. So let's just talk briefly, because I've not got long left, on the lack of speech. So alongside this sort of wanting to cover over this not knowing with this version of this, the self as a cyborg self, there was silence. And I wondered to myself, how does that impact on the subject if you are silent? Because it wasn't just that they were like, oh, I'm just going to externalize all my thinking to the machine. It was also, and I'm not going to have any interaction with the other human beings in the room. And I've seen that having a huge impact, actually, a huge negative impact. So Lacan, this is in the form and function chapter, talks about speech as possessing a summoning characteristic. It says, hey, you, I want to talk to you. Hey, you, come over here. And it requires a reaction from the receiver of the speech. So it's not just that it's a backwards and forwards, it's getting a reaction from the other person. And that transforms the receiver, because it creates this link between these two people. It isn't just that it's, there's a link between them, it's a transformation. So through speech, there's a transformation going on, and it's concerned with this intersubjectivity. And I really like this idea. This was one of the pictures I drew, obviously not that one, but I drew a bee on my notes. Lacan talked about the complex dances of bees and how they involve communication. There's a message going on. and it's an encoded message, but it's not really language. It's not the same. And I thought, oh, that's really quite comparable to you put a prompt in and you get a response. It's like the encoded messages of bees, but it's not a language because the bee message is frozen in its function. It's just got this one function to get this response from the other bees. Just like when you put a prompt into AI, there's a frozen function there. Lacan talks about language evoking. So he says the function of language in speech is not to inform AI, but to evoke. And I love the fact that Lacan talks about a cybernetic device. Fantastic. So he says there is no cybernetic device imaginable that can turn his response into a reaction. A reaction, I think of a chemical reaction, it's a change in state. So when you have an interaction with human beings, you have a change in state. It's a transformation. It's not a response. A response is what you get from AI. So it changes the reality of the other person. And he says language is enveloped in the highest function of speech, in as much as speech commits its author by investing the addressee in a new reality. And that is what is not happening in my classroom. So my students are not engaging with that. They're not engaging with the transformational, aspect of speech. They're just getting a response from from their machines, their phones and devices. So, as I am a teacher, I thought I better tell you what I did about this. So, because I have actually done something about it. So they are my students there. So practical stuff. I was like, this is awful. These students, these children, they're not forming relationships. They're not having a transformational experience of education. Do you know when I said, oh, we've had an hour, you can have a break for 5 minutes? They just went on TikTok. They didn't even speak to each other. So I started saying, oh, we're having a break for 5 minutes. Talk to your friend, person sitting next to you about what you're doing at the weekend. Because they weren't even having those really basic conversations. And then they're in my office crying because they're lonely and they haven't made any friends. So I introduced no devices section in my lessons. I was like, right, put all your devices away. Here's a piece of paper. I want you to talk and I want you to write on that piece of paper. And I've pretty much been I've enforced that as much as I can without being, too strict. I've explained to them why I'm building discussion into my lessons. I'm like, I am doing this because, you need to talk about this. I am interested in what you think. I don't want to know what the computer says. And I've started to train the students in using speech. Never thought those words would come out of my mouth as a teacher of undergraduates. But that's what I'm having to do, to train them to use speech. So, there you go. Thank you.